Hi all, I'm Megha Gahlawat. I'm a biology faculty here at Ask IITians, and today we are going to do the one and only easiest chapter that is there in the 10th standard, that is the management of our natural resources. Okay, and it's very important for you guys to understand that as easy as this chapter is, it is very scoring, and most of the questions which are very quick to answer come from this chapter, which we'll be reading along, and I'll be telling you, marking those questions so that it is easier for you to score more marks in the exams. Okay, now moving forward to this chapter, although we are going to learn a lot in this particular chapter, we'll be learning about the different type of natural resources. We'll be learning about different type of movements which took place. What should we do for the sake of the proper development of our human species alongside the natural topography or the nature that we have here on earth, so that there's a proper sustainable development. Apart from that, we'll be learning about different type of conservations. How do we conserve the biodiversity or the natural resources, and so on. We're going to learn actually a lot about this chapter, right? So starting from the topics that we'll be covering here today are the introduction, the types of natural resources, forest and wildlife, and the conservation of biodiversity. Out of this is a very important topic, and out of this multiple questions come. Okay, so it's very good for if you kind of note this down, and if you kind of uh, is able to, and if you're kind of are able to memorize them, it'll be very good for you. Now, see, it's very important for you to understand, first of all, natural resources. What are those? Everything that nature gives us, in the simple words, everything that nature gives us, everything, starting from the birds to the animals to the mountains to the water, every single thing is a natural resource. And what is a resource? First of all, resource is anything which is useful. Okay, anything which is useful, which is useful. There are multiple type of resources. For the starters, we have the natural resources which are provided by the nature, which we'll be learning about a little bit more in this upcoming session. And second is the man-made resources. Now, man-made resources are the ones which are produced by the human beings. For example, this stylus that I have, with the help of which I'm able to write on the screen, is the man-made resource. The spectacles that I have, with the help of which I can see, thank God, is an man-made resource, right? So resources basically are either man-made or natural. Man-made or natural. All right, I hope you can differentiate between both of these properly now. Apart from their origin, this is on the basis of the origin, bacha. Apart from the origin, we can also conclude the types of resources based on if we can use them time and again, if we can use them, for a longer period of time, or if we can use them very, let's say, cautiously, so that we can have them for the future as well. And on the basis of that, we have the resources such as the renewable and non-renewable. Renewable and non-renewable. So it's very important for you to understand that renewable are the resources such as the sunlight, wind, which could be used time and again, the tidal energy, etc., etc. But non-renewable are the one which cannot be used. Earlier, water came into the renewable resource, but nowadays water is also a non-renewable resource because we have been wasting it, so much. And also, according to the recent news, an iceberg the size of the New York City, actually larger than the New York City, has been broken up into the Antarctica. Now, at that pace, I don't think the water is a renewable resource at all, in the present scenario. Apart from that, we have the fossil fuels, which is like the biggest example everybody has studied till now. All the petrols, diesels, etc., etc., etc. Those are the non-renewable resources, right? Apart from that, if we talk about the nature, how nature exactly is interacting with us, we all interact with our surroundings. That is what we call as the environment, where all the living things and non-living things interact with each other in order to, comprehend the proper living and stay in a very peaceful and harmonious manner. Also to develop and proliferate or to flourish properly, right? So with the help of that, Natural heritage, that is the land, water, that all has been used by the human beings very judiciously, very properly, for the development of their own trade. For example, the fisheries, tourism, mining, forestry, etc., etc. On top of that, we have the biodiversity. Now biodiversity here is one of the biggest resources that we have. It's very important. Biodiversity is very, very important for maintaining the balance in the nature. That is why it is the biggest resource, right? Now, for what exactly is the biodiversity, we'll be understanding with the help of a video. Okay, now starting with this video, let's get on with it, and I'll be explaining everything on the way as well.
Our planet's diverse, thriving ecosystems may seem like permanent fixtures, but they're actually vulnerable to collapse. Jungles can become deserts, and reefs can become lifeless rocks, even without cataclysmic events like volcanoes and asteroids. What makes one ecosystem strong and another weak in the face of change? The answer, to a large extent, is biodiversity. Biodiversity is built out of three intertwined features: ecosystem diversity, species diversity, and genetic diversity.
Now, see, remember when I told you how biodiversity is the most important natural resource that we have? It's because it is very much important for the sake of balance, right? So, all the balance that is being maintained by the ecosystem, the diversity of ecosystem, as in there could be a marine ecosystem, there could be a land ecosystem, there could be a desert ecosystem, a forest ecosystem, all of that, on top of which we have the species diversity, as in, the variety of species, monkeys, snakes, birds, butterflies, etc., etc. And then we have the genetic diversity. Since all of you must have covered the chapter heredity and evolution, you're well aware about what genetics is, right? Basically, the DNA which we have in the nucleus is what the genetic actually is, right? Now, moving on with the video.
The more intertwining there is between these features, the denser and more resilient the weave becomes. Take the Amazon rainforest, one of the most biodiverse regions on Earth, due to its complex ecosystems, huge mix of species, and the genetic variety within those species. Here are tangled liana vines, which crawl up from the forest floor to the canopy, intertwining with treetops and growing thick wooded stems that support these towering trees. Helped along by the vines, trees provide the seeds, fruits, and leaves to herbivores such as the tapir and the agouti, which disperse their seeds throughout the forest so they can grow. Leftovers are consumed by the millions of insects that decompose and recycle nutrients to create rich soil. The rainforest is a huge system filled with many smaller systems like this, each packed with interconnected species. Every link provides stability to the next, strengthening biodiversity's weave. That weave is further reinforced by the genetic diversity within individual species.
Now, before we go any further, it's see, you guys do understand that we just talked about how exactly different type of species, they're helping in maintaining the balance by the proper food cycle. For example, we have the autotrophs, which are the trees which produce their own food. Auto self troph nutrition, self nutrition, that is what the plants are doing. Okay, and then we have the plants giving the food to the herbivores, that is the heterotroph, hetero different troph nutrition. So depending upon the different organism for the nutrition, we have the heterotroph which eat the the fruits and the leaves and the grass, etc., etc. So when they die or when they're killed by the carnivores and then carnivores die, we have the decomposers which grow on dead and decaying animals, for example the fungus, the mushrooms, etc., etc., right? So there are different things which basically go ahead and maintain the balance in the ecosystem. Now moving forward.
Which allows them to cope with changes. Species that lack genetic diversity due to isolation or low population numbers are much more vulnerable to fluctuations caused by climate change, disease, or habitat fragmentation. Whenever a species disappears because of its weakened gene pool, a knot is untied and parts of the net disintegrate. So, what if we were to remove one species from the rainforest? Would the system fall apart? Probably not. The volume of species, their genetic diversity, and the complexity of the ecosystems form such rich biodiversity in this forest that one species gap in the weave won't cause it to unravel. The forest can stay resilient and recover from change. But that's not true in every case. In some environments,
Before moving forward to the another environment and cases, let's just give the analysis of what we just saw right now. We saw how exactly if we just break one single knot of the complete cycle, if the cycle is complex and if the cycle is filled with the variety of the organisms, the entire cycle won't fall apart, okay, it won't all collapse. But if there is less diversity of the species and if there's everything is hanging by a little thread, that is going to cause problems, and that is why we should kind of start conserving and thinking about the biodiversity. Now, talking about the different environments that are there.
taking away just one important component can undermine the entire system. Take coral reefs, for instance. Many organisms in a reef are dependent on the coral. It provides key microhabitats, shelter, and breeding grounds for thousands of species of fish, crustaceans, and mollusks. Corals also form interdependent relationships with fungi and bacteria. The coral itself is a loom that allows the tangled net of biodiversity to be woven. That makes coral a keystone organism, one that many others depend on for their survival. So, what happens when destructive fishing practices, pollution, and ocean acidification weaken coral or even kill it altogether? Exactly what you might think. The loss of this keystone species leaves its dependents at a loss too, threatening the entire fabric of the reef. Ecosystem, species, and genetic diversity together form the complex tangled weave of biodiversity that is vital for the survival of organisms on Earth. We humans are woven into this biodiversity too. When just a few strands are lost, our own well-being is threatened. Cut too many links, and we risk unraveling it all. What the future brings is unpredictable, but biodiversity can give us an insurance policy, Earth's own safety net, to safeguard our survival.
Right. So, what you exactly understood by the video is that there are some keystone species which are extremely important, which can hold everything together. But if they are attacked, everything's going to fall apart. Other than that, there are species which are helping in maintaining the balance. But let's say if they were to collapse or if they were to extend, the entire system will still hold up. Okay. So, it's not that we have to just save the keystone species in order to survive, in order to, keep a hand at the planet, but all the species in order to survive and help it thrive properly as well. Okay. Now, that being said, we're going to move forward with the presentation and the lesson. All right, now that being said, we're going to move forward to the different types of the natural resources. See, I did tell you that there are different type of natural resources which we'll be talking about, okay? So starting with the different types, let's just study about how we have the oil and coal and natural gas, metals, stones, sand, etc., etc., etc. Apart from the air, sunlight, soil, water, birds, animal, basically everything which is coming from the nature is a natural resource, okay, and it helps us in the surviving. We can make food, we can drive our motorbikes or the cars, we can basically do a lot of things. Why? Because we have a lot of natural resources. So if we talk about them one by one, we basically have the water first of all, which is like extremely important, right? But before that, let's just give a little idea to what exactly we have as the renewable and the non-renewable. If we categorize them into the renewable and non-renewable, we're going to have the renewable as the sunlight, air or soil, water. Water not so much, so we're going to put it aside. Non-renewable are the fossil fuels, okay, metals, minerals, etc. Now, that being said, we basically have a well categorized group. Okay. Now, moving forward to the water, first of all, which is like the extremely important natural resource. If we talk about the water, water basically is, let's say, all the cellular forms, all the living forms of life, all of them require water, because even our own body is 70% water, right? So it is the most important of all the uh, resources that we have onto the terrestrial surface or onto the surface of earth for that matter, right? And despite, nature's monsoon and the rivers and springs and everything, we still have a large reservoir of the underground water as well, right? You must have studied about everything in the earlier classes or juvenile classes, right? So we just have to understand how do we help in conserving the water, because even after all of that, we still are depleting water, we still are polluting water, we basically are, exploiting every single thing that we have at our hands, and we're not thinking about the future. Now, that being said, let's just go ahead by, starting with the importance of water, how three-fourth of the Earth's surface is water, how 97.5% of water, on the other hand, is, all saline. Basically, everything is, ocean water. We cannot drink it. It's not fit for the consumption. And we just have about 2.5% of the fresh water. Earlier, let's say when I was in the school, the amount of fresh water that was present in the rivers and glaciers was 3.1 now, and now it has reduced to 2.5. Do you see how drastic the changes are in just a few years? Now, that is also a very big concern that we should, ponder upon in order for us to survive in the future. Apart from that, all the, let's say 40% of the Earth population or world's population lives in the arid or the semi-arid regions, and they spend substantial or tenacious amount of time and energy and efforts and everything in obtaining what? Water. And we still are depleting it, right? So it's very important for us to irrigate, our crops in order to provide ourselves with the food, to provide ourselves with the proper living. We need water for the survival as well, and for that we need to do the water harvesting, because that is the only thing that can help us right now. And if we talk about the water harvesting, we have multiple techniques which can help in, which can help in obtain the rainwater, right? We can capture the water from the rooftop, we can capture the water from the local catchment areas, or the local public areas which have like big roofs. We can set the water harvesting system there. We can help in saving the water from the local streams in order to avoid the excess flooding, or the watershed management for that matter. So you should understand, as much as water we are harvesting, it is going to help us, okay? And water harvesting has been a big part of our own culture for a very longer period of time, and that is why we are going to study water harvesting in about two methods. We are going to study the traditional water harvesting and the modern water harvesting, right? See, we have kunds, khadans, bandhis, tankas, different type of traditional water harvesting system, which were very prevalent in the older times. Okay, starting with the kunds, and I'm going to write this down here for you so that you can note it down, and then I'm going to explain. Okay, kunds and khadans and bandis, and we have the tankas. Now, see, kunds basically are, let's say, the kind of systems which are found in the desert regions most of all, okay? And it is sort of an underground tank. Kund is basically an underground tank, and whenever even if a little rainfall is there in the kund, it is opened, and everything lets onto the falling of rainwater inside the kund, and then it is covered properly, and then it is like covered with the lid, and the lid is very heavy. It is usually made up of cement nowadays. Earlier it was made up of heavy block of stones. Okay, so in those kunds, or kundis for that matter, the underground tank, it was basically, primarily developed for the drinking water problems. Okay, so once that was done, once the water was collected, it was covered with the lid, and on top of that we had the jute bags covering it. Okay, and usually is mostly in the Rajasthan regions. Then we have the khadans. Khadans are the kind of harvest surfaces which take up the water, runoff water for the agriculture. Right, let me just explain it a little better to you. See, this is the Khadan system that I was talking about. When I talk about the Khadan system, it usually is to catch the runoff water from the agriculture. So what do we have? We have the catchment area. Catchment area is usually high. Okay, it's high up so that water can slide off or water can just, run off. And then we have a lower ground like this, which we call as the Khadan or the cropped area, which is, either deliberately dug up in order to maintain the lower area, so that all the water which is just, running off from the catchment area could be collected into that particular low khadan or the cropped area. Now it's very important to contain that water as well. Now to contain that water, we build the khadan band. Khadan Band is kind of a dam thingy or a wall thingy which is built in order to avoid the collected water to spill off or to run off to someplace else. It just is to contain. Okay, and with the help of this cropped or Khadan area, the seepage in the underground increases. All the water sieves through the soil and it is collected inside the underwater table, which we can dug up from the dug well. Okay, that being said, we have the bandis. Bandis you must have heard about at a lot of places as well, Bandis are basically man-made or natural reservoirs, kind of a little pond, which are just filled up with the water until there is monsoon, and after monsoon they dry up. So it's just kind of a pond kind of thing, and those were really, really used for the sake of rice cultivation in the areas. Okay, and then we have the tankas. Now tankas are very, very reliable. They're also for the drinking water, and tankas are also the kind of tanks which are closed. They could be underground, they could be not underground. That completely depends upon the people how they build it. They could be above the ground, they could be underground. Okay, tankas are just like this, they're like tanks basically, if we talk about. Okay, now that being said, we have the modern methods. Now, going to the modern methods of water harvesting are equally efficient. And since they are modern methods, you might just, relate to them. So we have the dams, first of all. We have the groundwater tanks, and sorry, we have the groundwater dams, and we have the ferrocement tanks. Ground water, I hope you're noting this down with me. Tanks and ferrocement tanks. Dams, I mean, okay, groundwater dams. Correct this right now? Right. So we have the groundwater dams and we have the ferrocement tanks. In order for you to understand what exactly is a groundwater dam, we have, see, structures there are. Groundwater dams are the ones which could be obstructing the natural flow of the groundwater, and all of that groundwater is collected at one place, and then we insert a dug well. Okay, like not a dug well, then we insert basically a tube well, or we kind of dug well as well. Okay, so it is usually found in the India, Africa, Brazil, most of the parts of the world. So we kind of build a dam. Okay, we build a dam and we obstruct the natural groundwater flow, and so the water kind of collects at that particular area, and then we insert a tube well, and then we pump the tube well and we use that water. So that is what groundwater dams are. And those groundwater dams, they are extremely advantageous. Why? Because the water is safe, water is not evaporating, water is kind of not contaminated as well, and it stays there for a longer period of time, right? On top of that, let me just show you the diagram. Now see, this is the diagram that I was talking about. If we talk about the groundwater dams are like this. We have a tube well, right? And we have the groundwater, we have the direction of the groundwater as well, and we construct a stream level bed, and we construct an obstruction basically, which helps in collecting all that water at one place. I've already discussed the advantages and everything. And the next thing that we are going to move are the ferrocement tanks. Now these ferrocement tanks are nothing special but the tanks which are made up of cement. Okay, cement tanks, which you can find on top of many houses, underground, in many buildings, in hospitals, in parks. Okay, you can just find them anywhere. Let me just give you a picture in order for you to relate properly. Now moving to this ferrocement tank, as the picture shows, what you see right here is this is a tank. This could either be placed in an open area, this could either be constructed at the side of the house. So if we have a house right here, and at the side of the house, if we construct a ferrocement tank right here, this ferrocement tank will have a pipeline which will be attached to the house. Okay, and this pipeline will be helped with a lot of water that will be collected from the rain, right? So these are the different type of water harvesting system. I hope you learned well, right? And moving forward to the forest and the wildlife. Now see, forest and the wildlife, this is one of the most important thing that you will be studying right here today. And this also let's say helps you in understanding what are the different terminologies which are used. So I hope you have your pen and paper or the pen and notebook, and you're noting everything down, whatever I say. Okay, and I'm writing all the important terminologies. So you see, forest and wildlife, they're extremely necessary. I've already explained why. In order to maintain the life on earth, in order to maintain the population on earth, be it us, be it animals, be it birds, be it all the different kind of organisms which are present, right? So forest ecosystem, first of all, what is ecosystem? Ecosystem is when living and non-living things interact with each other. So a system which is made by the help of interaction is what an ecosystem is. Okay, now it could be primary, secondary, tertiary consumers in the food chain. First of all, you should understand what is a food chain. Food chain is a linear exchange of energy. Okay, linear exchange of energy. How? Let me just give you a very simple example. Grass eaten by grasshopper. Okay, and then grasshopper eaten by a frog. So let's say if this grass had energy of about 1%, 0.1% was obtained by the grasshopper and 0.01% was obtained by the frog. You see, only 10% energy travels. And this is what a food chain is. Now it has primary, secondary, tertiary consumers. Consumers, when it comes to the grasshopper, which is the primary consumer, frog, which is the secondary consumer, and then after frog, let's say if it's an eagle, it'll be tertiary consumer, and this is the producer. Why? Because it is producing with the help of the photosynthesis. I hope this is very, very easy for you to understand. This is something that you have been studying for a longer period of time, right? You see, it kind of helps. Forests help in maintaining the biodiversity. How? Because they provide with the habitat to live in. They provide the resources for the sake of proliferation and thriving, right? Now, that being said, we're going to watch a super cool video, and I'm going to give you a lot of definitions during this video. So just keep up on your toes, okay? All right, then everyone, let's just start with the video. All the things that you're seeing right here, the biodiversity, flora and fauna, classification into normal, endangered, vulnerable species, all these species, all these classifications, these are very, very important. And along these classifications, you're going to have to learn the examples as well, because those examples are equally important and they're going to help you in scoring more marks. Okay, now moving ahead with the video, let's just get ahead with it.
Biodiversity includes cultivated species, wildlife, and different types of life found on Earth. They are linked in a system through multiple network of interdependencies.
What this guy is saying here, the interdependencies is what we just talked about, the food chain, and an accumulation of a lot of food chain is called as the food web. Okay, so let's just get on with it.
As eagle depends on snake, snake on frog, frog on butterfly, butterfly on flowers, and flowers depends on sun. We, humans, are also dependent on the system for our existence. For example, we depends on trees for fresh oxygen. We depends on river for drinking water. We depends on soil that produces our food. India has 8% of the total number of species in the world. Flora and fauna in India, 10% of India's wild flora and 20% of its mammals are endangered.
Flora, all the vegetation, fauna, all the animals. Okay.
Some of them are cheetah, pink-headed duck, mountain quail, forest, spotted owlet, and plants like Madhuca, insignis, and Habardia, heptaneuron.
The names of the plants are basically the scientific names. In order for you to understand the scientific names, see, these names are not written in the exact right manner that they should have been written here. Whenever we write the scientific names, we make sure that the first name starts with a capital letter and the last name starts with a small letter, and we always underline them whenever we are writing them, and if we are typing them, that should always be in the italics. Okay, you'll be learning more about naming of the organisms in the 11th standard. Now moving forward.
The forest and tree cover in India is 23.81% of the total geographical area, out of which dense forest covers 12.24%, open forest covers 8.99%, and mangrove forest covers 0.14%. Classification of existing plants and animal species. Normal species are those whose population levels are considered to be normal for their survival. Examples are cattle, pine, and rodent. Endangered species are those which are in danger of death. Examples are crocodile, Indian tiger, and sangai, which is brow anteater deer in Manipur. Vulnerable species are those whose population has declined to levels from where it moves into the endangered category. Examples are blue sheep, Asiatic elephant, and dolphin. Rare species are those which have small population. Examples are Himalayan brown bear, desert fox, and hornbill. Endemic species are those which are only found in some particular areas. Examples are Mathun in Arunachal Pradesh and Andaman wild pig. Extinct species are those which are not found after searching them in areas where they may occur. Examples are pink-headed duck and cheetah.
Different type of All right, so we studied about a lot of terminologies related to what we have as the endangered species. Endangered are the ones which have the less population. Normal species, the number of organisms in those species are, okay for their survival for a longer period of time. And then we have the vulnerable species which have extremely low population, extremely less population. Then we have the extinct species. Extinct are the one which have been completely wiped out from the face of the earth, for example, the dodo and the dinosaurs. And we have the endemic species. Endemic species or the epidemic species are the ones which are found only in one area. For example, if we talk about the different type of goats or the different type of, yak, let's say yak, for example, is only found in the snowy areas, only in the few regions. Or if we talk about the Sundarban forest, where we have the trees which are very specific to that particular region itself, right? Now, that being said, we are going to move forward to the conservation of the biodiversity. Now, this right here is a very, very big topic which you need to understand properly. Okay, conservation is very important. Why? The balance, survival, proliferation, thriving, earth, human species, continuation, extinction, and everything. I hope you can relate to those keywords. Now, see, it's very, very important for the sake of the sustainable benefit or sustainable development to have the conservation of biodiversity. What is sustainable development? That you need to know first of all. It is the development where we utilize the resources very judicially in the present and we save them for the future as well. Okay, so the development which is being carried out in a perfect balance in order to utilize the resources at present and in order to save the resources for the future generations as well. That is what sustainable or the balanced development and benefits are. Okay, as mentioned here, for present and the future generation. Conservation is basically of two types. Okay, I'm going to broadly describe all of it here, and then I'm going to show you two videos on the basis of which you can easily note down and decide everything properly. So we have the in situ and we have the ex situ. In situ conservation is something which we utilize by saving all the organisms in their own natural habitat, in their own natural environment. And ex situ conservation is when we save the animals, when we conserve the animals, but out of their normal environment, okay, out of their actual environment. For example, if we talk about the in situ conservation, we talk about the national parks. We talk about, you must have studied about this in the ninth standard as well. It's just a quick revision of all of that. We have the national parks, we have the wildlife sanctuaries, and we have the biosphere reserve. On top of that, we have the XC2. XC2 can go ahead with the zoo, and we have the cryopreservation. Cryopreservation is when we use the liquid nitrogen, which is at the temperature of minus 196 degrees Celsius, and we kind of just freeze the things. Okay, and collection of rare plants in botanical gardens. The largest botanical garden is found in the Europe, the Royal Botanical Garden, which belongs to the Queen, obviously. Anyway, now that being said, let's just get ahead with the video. All right, now coming to this video, first things first, we should be learning about why should we conserve the biodiversity, and then how should we conserve the biodiversity, why and how two questions will be answered, and extremely important, make sure that you pay attention over here. Okay.
They are A. Narrowly utilitarian, B. Broadly utilitarian, and C. Ethical.
I'm so sorry. Right. So let's see. I'll be explaining all of that for you so that we don't have to waste our time watching the entire video. Narrowly utilitarian are the things which are not of as much use to us, but they are kind of, have a narrow spectrum of usage to the human beings. And then we have the broadly utilitarian, which are like extremely, extremely useful for us, and the human beings are kindly exploiting everything. And then ethical is something which is related to how exactly the different habitat belong to the different species, and we should let them be. Okay, we should just let them be in peace. Now moving forward with the video.
Narrowly utilitarian reasons. The narrowly utilitarian arguments for conserving biodiversity are obvious. Humans derive countless direct economic benefits from nature. They are food, fiber, firewood, construction material, industrial products, and products of medicinal importance. More than 25% of the drugs currently sold in the market worldwide are derived from plants, and 25,000 species of plants contribute to the traditional medicines used by native people around the world. In the present condition, how many more medicinal plants yet to explore in tropical plants? With increasing resources put into bioprospecting, nations with rich biodiversity can expect to reap enormous benefits. Broad utilitarian. This argument says that biodiversity plays a major role in many ecosystem services that nature provides. Example A. Oxygen supply. The Amazon forest is estimated to produce 20% of the oxygen in the Earth's atmosphere through photosynthesis. B. Pollinators' role. Pollination is another service in the nature. Ecosystem provides through pollination layer, bees, bumblebees, birds, bats. There are other intangible benefits which we derive from nature. Example, the aesthetic pleasures of walking through thick woods, watching spring flowers in full bloom, wake up in a bulbul's song in the morning. We can't put a price tag to the ecosystem services which are playing a vital role in conserving biodiversity. Ethical argument. According to this argument, philosophically or spiritually, we need to realize that every species has an intrinsic value, even if it may not be of current or any economic value to us. We have a moral duty to care for their well-being and pass on our biological legacy in good order to future generations. How do we
See, basically, let me just, take it out to you in a very summarizing manner. First thing, narrowly utilitarian, we basically have the uses which are economical. Broadly utilitarian, the uses are the ones which help in surviving on this planet. And third is the ethical, where we kind of, have the morals to hand down whatever we have received to the future generations in the same conditions or in the better condition that we have received it. Okay. Now, moving forward to the how exactly do we conserve the biodiversity, right?
conserve biodiversity? Its biodiversity at all levels is protected. Example, when we save the forests, tigers are also saved. Biodiversity conservation occurs in two ways. A. In situ conservation, and B. Ex situ conservation. In situ conservation. Many nations, faced with the conflict between development and conservation, find it unrealistic and economically not feasible to conserve all their biological wealth. Invariably, the number of species waiting to be saved from extinction far exceeds the conservation resources available. On a global basis, this problem has been addressed by eminent conservationists. They identified, for maximum protection, certain biodiversity hotspots, regions with very high levels of species richness and high degree of endemism. Initially, 25 biodiversity hotspots were identified but subsequently 9 more have been added to the list, bringing the total number of biodiversity hotspots in the world
See, now you understand what hotspots are. Hotspots are the regions which have the high variety of biodiversity and they're rich in the species, be it for the plants, be it for the animals. Okay, moving forward.
to 34. These hotspots are also regions of accelerated habitat loss. 3 of these hotspots, Western Ghats and Sri Lanka, Indo-Burma and Himalaya, cover our country's exceptionally high biodiversity regions. Although all the biodiversity hotspots put together cover less than 2% of the Earth's land area, the number of species they collectively harbor is extremely high, and strict protection of these hotspots could reduce the ongoing mass extinctions by almost 30%. In India, ecologically unique and biodiversity rich regions are legally protected as biosphere reserves, national parks, and sanctuaries. India now has 14 biosphere reserves, 90 national parks, and 448 wildlife sanctuaries. India has also a history of religious and cultural traditions that emphasize protection of nature. In many cultures, tracts of forests were set aside and all the trees and wildlife were venerated and given total protection. Such sacred groves are found in Khasi and Jaintia hills in Meghalaya, Aravalli hills of Rajasthan, Western Ghat region of Karnataka and Maharashtra, and the Sargat Chand and Bastar areas of Madhya Pradesh. In Meghalaya, the sacred groves are last refuges for a large number of rare and threatened plants.
Hi, I'm Nick, and we're here at Strathmore University in Nairobi, Kenya. We're here installing a Huawei Sun 2000 10 KTL inverter. This is the oldest PV training school in Kenya, so we're
Exit
All right, then moving forward with this one.
situ conservation. In this approach, threatened animals and plants are taken out from their natural habitat and placed in special settings where they can be protected and given special care. Botanical gardens, zoological parks, wildlife safari parks serve the purpose. There are many animals that have become extinct in the wild, but continue to be maintained in zoological parks.
Now, see, one such example is the panda. China has done an incredible job in taking the panda out of the endangered and vulnerable species. Now they have a lot of population of panda, and that is a very good thing that has been done on the human part. Now, moving forward with the video, let's just go ahead with it.
In recent years, ex situ conservation has advanced beyond keeping threatened species in enclosures. Now, gametes of threatened species can be preserved in viable and fertile condition for long periods using cryopreservation techniques. Eggs can be fertilized in vitro and plants can be propagated using tissue culture methods. Seeds of different genetic strains of commercially important plants can be kept for long periods in seed banks. Biodiversity knows no political boundaries, and its conservation is therefore a collective responsibility of all nations. The historic Convention on Biological Diversity, the Earth Summit, held in Rio de Janeiro in 1992, called upon all nations to take appropriate measures for conservation of biodiversity, and sustainable utilization of its benefits. In a follow up, the World Summit on Sustainable Development held in 2002 in Johannesburg, South Africa, 100 countries pledged their commitment to achieve by 2010 a significant reduction in the current rate of biodiversity loss at global, regional, and local levels. The IUCN Red List categories. The International Union of Conservation of
See, all these abbreviations IUCN, the International Union of Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources, which is maintaining the red data book or the red list, these are very important. So pay attention to this especially, okay?
Nature and Natural Resources IUCN maintain a document called Red List or Red Data Book of taxa that are facing the risk of extinction.
Now, I hope all of that really helped you. And now I'm going to ask a few questions and then we can conclude the session. So what are the 4 type of natural resources which are found? We did all of those. Natural resources which are renewable, non-renewable, which are living, the biodiversity basically, and which are fossil fuels or non-living, as in the coal, petroleum, etc., etc. Right? Next question, how can we conserve forest and wildlife? We just did a thorough discussion on this one. Okay, so we're going to move forward with the answer. We have the national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, and we have the zoos and breeding and everything, putting into the storage, such as the seed bank or the cryopreservation that we just talked about. But I'd suggest you always start this question with in situ and ex situ. That is going to lend you more marks, okay? Because the examiner will see that how well constructed your answer is, okay? Now, that being said, that's all for today. And I'll be coming back with the next session of this chapter. And I'll see you soon. You guys take care, have fun, and do a lots of learning. See ya.